I'm joined today by Suzanna Walters, who's the author of The Tolerance Trap: How God, Genes, and Good Intentions Are Sabotaging Gay Equality. She's the Director of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies and Professor of Sociology at Northeastern University. It's really great to have you here today. I read your book with great interest, and I want you to maybe start us off by presenting the general concept, which is that same-sex marriage alone may be too low a bar to set for true LGBT equality. Let's start there.
Absolutely. And it's not just same-sex marriage. I mean, the crux of the argument for me is a couple things. One is that tolerance itself is a very limited framework and a low bar to set for real inclusion. I mean, we tolerate that which we would rather do without. We tolerate an ugly, bad day or a boring movie or a bad meeting. We don't tolerate great sex or a gorgeous day or a delicious meal. So to frame liberation in terms of tolerance seems to me a really low bar. But with the marriage question, you've really hit on something. It's an incredible, movement that has happened here. And the fact that there's been such gains, I think has surprised all of us. But the idea that a social movement should be identified completely with one single issue is part of the problem. Marriage is an important civil right, but it has come to the place in our society when all of gay rights seem conflated with and synonymous with gay marriage. And that's a real problem. There's so many other things that need to be worked on and so many other issues that still remain out of our reach.
Well, I think this is interesting for a couple different reasons, but there are a lot of, speaking of conflation, I feel that when I think about the argument you make, I start to conflate different issues in my mind. So let's take it piece by piece if we can.
Sure.
I agree with you that the concept of marriage, in spite of what we hear from so many religious rightists, is not something that has existed for all of human history, or that is necessarily the default that we should be looking to as the barometer for equality, right? We have had a number of different life situations for couples or groups or humans that have lived together over many, many years. However, we can't ignore that in modern society today, when we look back, and not to equate the issues, but to draw parallels, when we look back at when interracial marriage was against the law, when it stopped being against the law, racism didn't go away, but it certainly restructured the framework through which non-white people were seen. In the same way that when President Obama was elected president, of course, racism didn't go away, but we can't ignore that it was an important step. So I agree with you that in a sense, the institution of marriage is a very normative establishment type of institution, but we don't want to ignore that today, we happen to be fighting this battle today. It's not an unimportant issue in terms of the perception, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Look, and as a basic civil rights issue, it's a no-brainer. Discrimination is discrimination, and you can't tell a whole group of people you're second-class citizens, you don't have access to a variety of different social institutions. There is no question about it. But it's interesting you bring up the sort of election of Obama in that, because I do think part of what we're seeing now in sort of popular discourse, the media, the mass media, mainstream media, is a storyline that says, look, we've got, gay marriage looks like it's victorious. It's certainly the minority of states now, but the movement is forward. We got a couple gay people on television. Everyone's got a gay best friend. Even gay, macho football players can come out. The party's over. The revolution's won. We're there. We've worked so long, and here's the progress story, and we've made it. And I guess part of why I wrote this book is a sort of cautionary tale to say, wait a minute, let's celebrate these things and the power that they bring, and let's celebrate marriage and all the other rights. But let's not forget, for example, that a disproportionate number of homeless youth are gay and transgender. Let's not forget that we still can't pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and even after having it been introduced in Congress since the 90s, we still can't forget that homophobia as a structural, institutional, felt thing is alive and well. Just like, there was this sort of discourse when Obama was elected. It said, oh, we've got an African-American president. It's a post-racial society. That's as ridiculous as talking about there being a post-gay society, but it also actively makes it more difficult to actually reckon with those deeper structural causes of hatred and anti-gay animus. When you say, we're basically there. We've basically won. We see the light at the end of the rainbow tunnel. I think you cut off possibilities for really challenging the continuance of homophobia and embracing all of the possibilities that gay difference can offer straights and gays alike.
Are you seeing that happen, though? In other words, I interview people on all sides of the political spectrum all the time, and I've not had anyone suggest to me that because of the momentum that we're seeing, almost 20 states now with legal same-sex marriage, that we're close to ending the battle against homophobia. In other words, I've never come across anyone who thinks that. So I question whether, while I agree with you, I wonder whether it's a straw man argument of sorts.
Well, I don't think so. I have to tell you, in my research, I mean, when I'm looking at mainstream liberal, now I'm not talking about the right wing, I'm talking about mainstream liberal gay, straight allies of gays. I think with gay activists, I think most people know the party's not over here. We got a lot further to go. But I think there's a lot of back patting going on now by liberal allies, folks who write in the New York Times, and people who say, yes, there's still a lot of, hatred out there, but the battle for the hearts and minds of Americans has largely been won. Look, here's an example of that. When Michael Sam came out, most pundits in the mainstream media celebrated this as a moment, a signal moment that shows how enormously times have changed. Look at this. Even a macho football player is not afraid to come out of the closet and be gay. Haven't we broken another barrier? I look at that and I say, here we are in the year 2014, and we're still talking about first.
No, well, I agree with you there. Yeah. And, maybe we'd like to use the term corporate media on this show. And maybe in the corporate media, that is what was happening. But certainly on our program, I consider myself a straight ally. My point always is, when we see these big come out parties, is that really what we should be looking for is when this just isn't a big deal and it doesn't need to be celebrated. But I question whether it's just a matter of the outdated beliefs sort of aging out. I don't know that there's anything that can be done to make that happen faster.
Well, see, that's where I probably disagree with you a bit. And I think you're right, that I think there is a real difference between, the progressive media and the gay media and the straight media on, or corporate media on this. There's no question about it. And certainly in terms of academic, sort of scholarly discourse, there's a very robust debate and discussion about all of this among my colleagues in the academy. But I do actually think that the language of tolerance and the language of acceptance, which I think are discourses that have become the dominant discourses, both for straight allies and I would say for the mainstream gay movement, that those discourses actively undermine the movement forward. Because if all you ask for is tolerance, that's all you're going to get. If all you ask for is acceptance instead of a real embrace of integrative diversity, that's what you're going to get. And by the way, I think we've moved from a political moment where we said sort of, we're here, we're queer, get used to it, to now we're here, we're kind of gayish, just like us, And I think, again, that's not on the gay left and really progressive folks who see all the links between these things. But I do think that's I see that language of tolerance everywhere.
I agree with you there. And I've said before that I think when we hear from people all over the political spectrum that the discussion is around, do we tolerate these differences or not, that it is a very low bar. So and to be truly honest, I'm conflicted. I don't know if, because we're still early in this movement, as you say, we're not anywhere close to completing this, whether it's an acceptable first step, the kind of Ted Kennedy incrementalism approach. Right. If it's better than where we are now, then it's a good next step. Or if it's better to say, it's just too low a bar and we can't tolerate it. We can't tolerate only tolerance at all.
It's a very compelling argument, and I can't deny that I've been conflicted about it too. I mean, I came out a long time ago. And I will take tolerance and this day and age, much more than the days of yore, when gay bashing and anti-gay epithets were absolutely part of the dominant culture and not even to be commented on. So, tolerance over gay bashing, absolutely. But I actually don't think tolerance is just a sort of stepping stone on the way to a more inclusive and integrative society. I think tolerance isn't up to the job of really thinking through and imagining a more gender liberating world. I just don't think it is. Because you always have to ask the question, who are you to tolerate me? Who are you to accept me? When you start with that language of tolerance, you're always leaving the dominant group untouched. You're letting them off the hook to have to do anything but show up at a fun little lesbian wedding.
I think that's the best point, which is the group that is being the one that decides whether they will tolerate or not is in that position without that position ever being questioned. And I think that that's maybe the key point that we can take from it. And of course, we've been speaking with Suzanna Walters. I'll remind you again, the book is The Tolerance Trap: How God, Genes, and Good Intentions Are Sabotaging Gay Equality. Really a pleasure to have you on. Very interesting conversation.
Wonderful talking with you. Thanks so much.